Funding for Schaffrillas is provided by Skillshare, the sponsor of today's video. Tune until the end to find out how you can try Skillshare absolutely free. Yes, this is real, free. You will see how at the end. So let's do the video now. I love the How to Train Your Dragon trilogy. Nearly every single aspect of these movies is awe-inspiringly wonderful. The pacing is excellent. The writing is fantastic. The animation is stellar. The score is masterful. Without a doubt, this is easily the best animated trilogy of all time, even though the second one isn't great. Bye-bye! Okay, in all seriousness, despite my strong affinity for the series as a whole, I didn't quite get into the second one as much as the first and third. Weird, huh? I mean, this is kind of the fan favorite of the trilogy for a lot of people. How could it not work for me? Well, it still does. Keep in mind, I'm calling this the weakest in the trilogy, not the worst. Because worst implies the movie is bad, which it isn't, not by a long shot. This is a good movie that I just happen to have some problems with, to the point where I can't really call it a masterpiece like the first and third ones. And I get why that's a loaded statement, but trust me, we'll go into sufficient detail on why The Hidden World is a cinematic masterpiece at a later date. Just keep in mind that these are all my opinions, and I'm allowed to have them, and also we can all agree that this movie deserved the Oscar over Big Hero 6, obviously. So let's get right into it, starting with the elements I really like, because I like this movie overall, because it is a good movie. Leave me alone. First things first, by my definitions laid out way back when, this movie is indeed a perfect sequel. It expands the universe by showing us what lies beyond Berk and introducing new concepts like the Alpha Dragon. It continues the themes of uniting humans and dragons in order to attempt to bring peace to the world. Finally, it leaves an undeniable impact on the franchise since The Hidden World picks up narratively and thematically where this one leaves off. Toothless settles into his role as Alpha Dragon, and a new set of villains follow in the footsteps of Drago Bloodfist. One of the absolute best decisions this movie makes is picking up 5 years after the events of the first film. It allows us to see what a dragon-human utopia looks like and lets us focus on the conflict between our merry band of dragon riders and the outside world that refuses to adapt. Even though the third film does this better, but again, story for another time. In addition, the time skip allows us to follow a much more mature Hiccup who's still prone to make mistakes and errors of judgment. I like him in particular a lot more than I did in the first movie. I really like Eret, son of Eret. Considering how annoying the side characters generally are in this franchise, it's nice to see a more grounded supporting player who goes from a villain to a hero in a really natural, believable way. Also, Gobber is great, as usual. I like Valka's throwaway line about how the baby dragons listen to no one, and how it comes back in the climax when all the adult dragons are mind-controlled. And without a doubt, the best scenes in the movie are the interactions between Stoic and Valka. Their reunion after 20 years and the song they sing together are both insanely moving, and these moments are where the film absolutely soars. Overall, there's nothing actually bad about this film. Well, aside from the annoying side characters, but they're annoying in all three, so that's not a detriment solely for this film. This movie has the same strong elements one would come to expect from this franchise. It has stellar animation, a really impactful score, and a profound story to tell about the relationships between humans and dragons. The problem for me lies with the way the story is paced, along with certain characterization choices that I don't really agree with or consider to be missed opportunities. The original film had a laser-focused narrative where every single scene was dedicated to furthering the story, as well as the growing bond between Hiccup and Toothless. By comparison, this film tends to divide its time between Hiccup meeting his mother and spending a large chunk of time with her, and the villain slowly making progress towards his goal of taking control of all dragons. These two halves of the movie don't really gel together and make the pace of the film feel slower than it actually is. So let's start getting into why that is. Let's talk about Valka. So DreamWorks is pretty great at making sequels, way better than Disney and Pixar anyway. But there's this trend that they do in literally every single one of their current franchises that can be a little repetitive. Not as repetitive as twist villains or splitting the main characters up at the end, but still noticeable and a bit overused. This trend is parents. Think about it. Literally every DreamWorks trilogy has the characters meeting a long-lost parent or parents, usually in the second movie. Now Shrek plays with this concept a little, and unsurprisingly handles it the best out of these franchises in my opinion. We never actually meet Shrek's parents, it's actually Fiona's parents who make an appearance in the second movie. And this makes perfect sense because that's the dramatic crux of the story. Shrek has to deal with society's expectations of him, as well as imposter syndrome. He doesn't expect to be able to win over the king and queen, and as as a result, he no longer finds himself worthy of Fiona. There's great drama to be found by their inclusion. Kung Fu Panda probably handles this second best. From the surprise reveal of Poe's dad at the end of the second movie to his organic role in the third, I really like how his inclusion perfectly ties into Poe's tragic backstory and struggle to come to terms with what happened to his race. There's still an element of sorrow to be found due to the loss of his mother, and I think there's some strong dramatic weight by including Poe's father. And then there's Madagascar. Oh, sweet, sweet Madagascar. You know what? This is easily the lamest, most out of nowhere implementation, but honestly, I genuinely do not care. This is mainly a comedy series, and that's what I love about the second movie. It's cute and funny, and comparing it to these three franchises just feels wrong, so let's not. Out of the three strong dramatic DreamWorks franchises, I think How to Train Your Dragon implemented it the poorest. Starting from the beginning, one of the very few scenes I did not care for in the first movie was Stoic giving Hiccup a helmet made out of his mother's breastplate. It's a moment that I feel should have had more emotional significance since Hiccup is accepting a memento of his mother, but it feels more like, haha, Hiccup is holding his mom's boob container. Ha! It kind of bugs me, but it bugs me even more so that this is the only real mention we get of Hiccup's mother in the film. I wish this film really did more to establish the idea that Hiccup takes after his mother's more pacifist ideals. This would add some emotional depth for both Hiccup and Stoic as they both try to reconcile their grief having lost her, Hiccup having done so before he even knew her. But to be fair, that's on movie number 1. How does movie number 2 set up the reveal of Hiccup's mother? It doesn't. He briefly mentions that he never met her, and that's it. She is mentioned a total of 2 times in both of these movies before she is actually revealed. Even Madagascar 2 opened with a scene of Alex as a kid, establishing his long-lost father as a character in the movie before the reveal. This just strikes me as such a bizarre choice that sucks the dramatic weight out of Hiccup and Valka's first meeting. We don't know anything about Valka as a character other than she had a breastplate, which I guess implies she was a warrior within the village, but that's not even really true. She's just kind of a regular villager who values peace. I suppose the breastplate was made for her and she just didn't want to use it, which sure makes sense, but in my opinion, the easiest and best way to establish her character and personality would be by opening the movie with the night the dragons took her away. Think about it. It's currently shown to us in the middle of the movie as a flashback, with Valka narrating what happened that night to Hiccup, and by extension, the audience. Wouldn't it have been so much more impactful to see this scene play out in its entirety without any narration? Wouldn't it be stronger to show, not tell, the origin of Valka's connection with dragons and let the magnificent score convey the emotions of the scene? Wouldn't it be more powerful to show this dragon scratching Hiccup and then see a still masked Valka recognize him in the present day by the scar on his neck? Wouldn't it be an exceptionally strong juxtaposition to start the movie off by showing the grief and havoc dragons used to cause the village, then cutting to 20 years later where we can see the profound positive impact of Hiccup's actions in the first movie? This is such a simple change that would have dramatically improved the emotional impact of the story. Imagine if Toy Story 4 just started with the toys in Bonnie's room. No flashback scene with Bo Peep, just our toys being toys, living their best life. Then later on, when Woody finally encounters Bo, she says, "Aw, I remember the night we said goodbye." Then we see a flashback of that event taking place. I wholeheartedly believe that would have butchered the dramatic impact of her reveal and the actual goodbye scene itself, both of which are really great moments in the film as it currently is. And this is exactly how I feel about the way this film introduces Valka. I don't feel anything because I don't know anything about her, and it feels like the characters don't really care about her that much. They never really talk about her. Another solution, if you really want to keep the dragon attack scene as a flashback, would be to establish her personality earlier on through dialogue between Stoic and Hiccup. It really irks me that the talk they had at the beginning is only relayed to us through Hiccup relaying it to Astrid. It's a cute scene and a creative way of giving us this information, but I don't see why the movie would want to rob us of a potentially crucial heart-to-heart between father and son. It's a great way to directly illustrate the contrast between Stoic and Hiccup. It's a moment where they can talk about Valka and what she means to both of them, and it's kind of important to give Stoic as much characterization and screen time as possible to make his death later on all the more impactful. And if you really don't want to show us this potentially groundbreaking and emotional scene, then all you gotta do is have Stoic vent to Gabber about how much he misses Valka and how much Hiccup reminds him of her.
Four-headed, just like his mother. Aye, she could never stay put either.
Seriously, I don't understand how the screenplay possibly benefits from not mentioning Valka in any substantial way before her reveal. Is it to keep her presence in the movie a surprise? That'd be great if it wasn't in the freaking trailer. My other issue with Valka is that she doesn't serve much of a purpose to the story. Like, she's living at the place where the Alpha Dragon lives, so that's important, but really, you could remove her from the story and very little would change. Hiccup could simply find the Alpha Dragon, deduce its role, and the story could continue from there. Valka doesn't have any sort of heroic moment in the climax, or really any story significance outside of the middle chunk of the movie. Even the third film just doesn't use her at all, and it's baffling. But Valka isn't the only parent of Hiccup I take issue with in this movie. Let's discuss Viking Dad now. Oh no, Stoic dies. That means I'm automatically obligated to love this movie because it has real dramatic stakes and stuff, right? Okay, so Stoic's death is a great idea from a storytelling point of view. I love that Toothless is responsible for it. That's something most animated franchises wouldn't have the guts to do. I think the scene itself is really strong, aside from the actions of the villain, which I will get to later. But like I alluded to earlier, I don't know if the narrative really had enough focus on Stoic and his relationships to the other characters to justify his death in this movie. If anything, I'd feel sadder if he died in the first movie, unable to fully reconcile his ideological conflict with Hiccup before getting killed. I don't think that was the right place in the narrative to kill him off, but given how crucial he and his relationship to Hiccup were to the first movie's story, it would have elicited a much stronger emotional reaction out of me. Stoic's death just doesn't mean much to this movie's story, honestly. It's a regular old low point that the characters just kind of get over before riding to the third act. And this is because of what comes both before and after the death occurs. As I stated, Stoic just doesn't impact the narrative much early on. He tells Hiccup not to try and reason with Drago, but Hiccup just defies him anyway, so it doesn't really make a difference. You could argue that Hiccup's defiance of Stoic's order is what ultimately gets Stoic killed, and that's kinda true. But that idea never even crosses Hiccup's mind. If he had a moment where he realized he got his dad killed because he tried and failed to change Drago's mind against his father's wishes, that would have been really emotionally powerful. But he's more so just sad and mad at Toothless for like a minute, but never mad at himself. I feel like this is a huge missed opportunity that doesn't take advantage of the moral complexity of the situation. He says things that vaguely allude to this idea, like, I'm not the peacekeeper I thought I was, but on the whole, he doesn't seem as broken up about the situation as he probably should be. I mean, the entire conflict of the movie was his mistake. It really disappoints me that the weight of his personal failure never really registers with him. This is the same thing that disappoints me about The Last Jedi and muddies that film's message of failure being the greatest teacher. The characters who fail never really seem like they even realize the impact of their failure. I mean, I get that not every character can be a Zuko in terms of emotional complexity, especially in the medium of film, but one moment of emotional vulnerability where Hiccup blames himself for his father's death is all we needed. I think this is why Lion King is so beloved, because it's all about how we process grief and guilt. It's powerful to see Simba come to grips with his father's death, and yet this movie makes Stoic's death feel like an afterthought by the end. I feel like this event could have happened earlier in the film because it leads to a relatively rushed climax, but we'll get to that later. For now, let's turn to Valka and how she reacts to Stoic's death. You'd think after 20 years of not seeing him, then finding out he grew to appreciate dragons in the time she was gone, that she'd be a little remorseful at all the wasted time they spent apart. Nope! She's more concerned with telling Hiccup about how good dragons can be influenced by bad people. And I'm sorry, ma'am, your husband is dead. Can we get some sort of emotional, remorseful statement on this turn of events, please? I also really wish we could have gotten more of the two of them together, or even flashbacks to their time before she left. I said earlier that their reunion scene and their song and dance routine were the best parts of the movie, but I really wish they had more scenes together to establish what their relationship was like. I really like the fact that Stoic is instantly dead from Toothless's attack, unable to give his wife and son any last words, but I want to know what last words they wanted to give him, especially Valka. Even at the funeral, she doesn't have any words for him. Ultimately, what did their relationship really amount to in the context of the film's story? We had a couple of really excellent scenes that didn't really go anywhere. I don't feel much remorse at the idea of Valka returning home after 20 years without her husband being around, because that's not a concept the movie really bothers with. It's frustrating because the pieces are all right there. I know these writers are capable of this level of emotional resonance. They just don't feel like putting the pieces together for some reason. Speaking of pieces the writers didn't really feel like touching, I said earlier that I like Hiccup a lot better in this film than I did in the previous one. He's really come into his own as a person while still keeping some of his trademark awkwardness, and it's really cool to see. I also like Stoic when we get to see him, and Gabber is awesome as ever. But every other main character really isn't that great. Let's start with Astrid, whose role just feels significantly reduced. She and Hiccup have amazing chemistry when they're allowed to play off of each other, and she's also grown up quite significantly compared to the last time we saw her. I really do feel like the two of them are in love, and it made one of the few kind of forced elements of the original film really pay off. Here, she's mostly doing her own thing with the annoying side characters, and it's just not nearly as interesting as the stuff Hiccup is doing. They decide that since Stoic and Gabber haven't returned with Hiccup after an indiscernible amount of time, naturally they should go find and take on Drago themselves.
What?
I'm sorry, you all heard the story about how he's a mass murdering lunatic, right? How is this a good idea in any shape, way, or form? So surprise, surprise, they get captured and they inadvertently convince Drago to start attacking Burke. This is what I mean when I say I don't like some of the decisions characters make in this movie. They just seem to come from a place of ignorance and stupidity, even though it doesn't really fit Astrid's character. If it were just the side characters who developed this plan, I wouldn't even mind. I know they're idiots. But this just seems like a huge leap for someone like Astrid. Anyway, let's talk about the annoying side characters real quick. I tolerated them in the first movie, but it feels like their obnoxiousness was cranked up to the max here. I mean, I like fish legs. That's about it. Nearly every other joke they make is just painfully unfunny and truly adds nothing to the story. I feel like they even tend to kill the tone of potentially dramatic scenes.
I alone control the dragons.
No. Sorry.
This is a consistent issue in all three movies, but at least the third one realized they were annoying and played that up, with Grimmel saying what the audience was thinking about Roughnut. I also like that she leads him back to New Burke, because again, she's established to be so stupid that it's believable for this to occur. It's also a great instance of Grimmel exploiting his enemy's weaknesses. In the second movie, Roughnut is just here to thirst after Eret, son of Eret, and it's just such a hoot. I'm laughing so hard at this right now. Can you hear my laughter? It is infectious. Wow. Also, maybe the reason I like the third movie so much is that there's no TJ Miller. Hallelujah. But anyway, let's move on to this movie's saddest sidelining. Toothless. What? You exclaim. What do you mean Toothless is sidelined? He's in the movie so much. Yeah, but he doesn't really feel like much of a character in this one until the end, when he has to fight the Alpha's control. The first movie excelled at giving this dragon a strong personality and really building a significant bond between him and Hiccup. The third movie establishes him as his own being and examines what he wants out of life, independent of what his best friend wants. I just don't get any of that interesting characterization from the second film. It just feels like he's along for the ride as Hiccup comes to terms with how he feels about his father and becoming chief, as well as his newfound relationship with his mother. Toothless just doesn't feel as important this time around until the movie's ready for him to be important in the last act. Much like Stoic's death and the reveal of Valka, it sucks some of the dramatic weight out of crucial moments for his character. The scene where he confronts the Alpha is super badass, but it doesn't really feel like the movie took the time to build up to that moment, and it's not quite as impactful as it could be, because this movie never really made Toothless feel like a central character, so giving him this moment at the end doesn't really feel earned. But at the end of the day, the character that disappoints me the most out of everyone in this movie is Drago Bloody Fist. I don't really like Drago Bloodfist. On paper, he's a pretty scary antagonist, but I never really felt a sense of dread from his presence. Especially when he does that goofy shouting thing and everyone just lets him do it. Now's your chance, Valka. Stab him now. He literally turned around. He can't see you coming. Stab him. Just do it. You see, Grimmel always felt like a perfected version of what they were going for with Drago. He's the polar opposite of Hiccup, gaining praise and adoration from his village, not by taming a Night Fury, but by killing it and going on a genocidal rampage as a result. He feels much more cunning, smart, and manipulative, to the point where I'd call him the Lotso to Drago's Stinky Pete. Basically the same villain, but the third movie did it much better than the second. Don't get me wrong, Drago has a very menacing design and voice, plus the backstory Stoic tells about him is pretty chilling. You believe he's this murdery maniac who can't be reasoned with, but this presents its own problem. The idea that Drago can't be reasoned with because he kills without reason doesn't faze Hiccup in the slightest. He just says, maybe, but yeah, he'll learn his lesson when I talk to him. And honestly, I don't believe Hiccup is that naive. It might just be a matter of him overestimating his own abilities, like I said earlier, but Hiccup still doesn't really have to internally grapple with the consequences of his mistake. Again, this is a story about failure with no payoff or tangible growth from said failure. And those kind of stories frustrate me. One could argue that's the reason he doesn't try to change Grimmel's heart at any point, and the reason he ultimately decides to let the dragons go at the end of the series. That's actually some great narrative cohesion between installments, but it doesn't do this installment any favors. I want to get invested in the conflict of ideologies between Hiccup and Drago, but it turns out that Drago's just kind of an asshole.
He's an asshole.
He and Hiccup don't even meet until the 1 hour, 8 minute mark, because Hiccup's big quest to change Drago's heart took a complete backseat to him meeting his mother, which has no narrative relevance to the Drago storyline outside of introducing the Alpha. When they do finally meet, Drago explains his pretty standard tragic backstory and why he wants to get rid of dragons, but Hiccup picks his story apart pretty quickly.
Or maybe you need dragons to conquer people, to control those who follow you.
Clever boy.
So yeah, Drago is just one big world domination machine. The idea of redemption should be out of Hiccup's mind at this point, since this guy isn't motivated by tragedy or fear of dragons like Stoic was. He's motivated by power. He basically admits that he's just an asshole who wants to take over the world. Reminds me a lot of Getsis, actually. Look, I'm not gonna pretend like Grimmel is this amazing three-dimensional character. He's also just kinda some asshole. But he is a cold, slimy, intimidating asshole who actively outwits the heroes at nearly every turn. Drago is the one responsible for Stoic's death, but he doesn't even comment on this development or try to taunt Hiccup about it. Grimmel is such a bad bitch that he sneaks into Hiccup's room completely undetected, and they have this exchange.
He had it right, you know, making it his mission to destroy the beast so that you could grow up in a better world.
He changed his mind.
And look where that got him.
Holy shit. Most crucially, the narrative is not about Hiccup trying to redeem Grimmel. If you want to make the hero's goal redeeming a villain, try developing the villain more than not at all. A villain with conflicting ideologies to that of our hero would be really neat, but this movie doesn't give us that. Grimmel is the one who presents Hiccup with the notion that humans and dragons shouldn't mix. Grimmel is the one hell-bent on the extermination of all dragons because of his twisted ideals. Drago just wants to take over the tri-state area with the Alpha-inator and not much else, really. But the thing that really bugs me about this dude is that he just walks away as Toothless is about to kill Hiccup. Then he turns around, sees Hiccup is still alive, and just keeps walking. Bro, you have all the dragons. Just kill the Vikings. Burn their whole fleet of ships down. You kill without reason. Why are you not killing right now when you have a viable reason? Then in the climax, he tells Hiccup,
You certainly are hard to get rid of.
yeah, because you didn't even try. Drago doesn't even really get a satisfying death. He literally just vanishes when his dragon goes under the water. I kind of thought they were setting him up to return in the third movie, but nope, he's dead. It really feels like such a waste of a potentially stirring villain, but even so, the ending is pretty nice. It's a very nice, wholesome ending to a pretty good movie I enjoy a lot. But it just doesn't feel like a masterpiece to me. Not in the same way as its predecessor and successor. Okay, so since I just talked about the stuff I don't like for this movie for a ton of time, that means I hate the movie, right?
No.
It's still a solid 7 out of 10 for me, which is apparently a bad rating because we live in the age of hyperbole where every movie has to be perfect or a cinematic disaster. I'm opting out of that. If I call something perfect, I really mean it. I'm not overusing that word. If I call something a cinematic disaster, like I probably will with Ralph Breaks the Internet eventually, then you know I mean it. How to Train Your Dragon 2 is neither. It is a good movie that I simply have more issues with than I do with the first and third ones. And if you disagree, that's totally cool. This movie absolutely reeks of passion, and you can tell everyone involved wanted to make it the best project it could possibly be. It should have beaten Big Hero 6 for the Oscar, unless the Lego movie was nominated, in which case that should have won, obviously.
That was belonging to a person of the male gender's previously mentioned action that is misguided.
This is a strong sequel by all accounts that I simply wish could be better. With a couple tweaks to the writing, this could easily be just as strong as the other two films in the series. It's not a movie that needs a lot of restructuring for it to be a masterpiece. It's just brought down by a ton of little things that ultimately piled up for me. But at the end of the day, it's still How to Train Your Dragon. I love what it contributes to the world of dragons, and I'm grateful that it set the stage for what is perhaps the greatest conclusion to a trilogy ever made. And I know that so many people hate this movie, or consider it disappointing, or believe it's contradictory to the themes of the first two. And to that I say, people said the same things about Shrek Forever After. Stay tuned. The day of reckoning is coming. One more thing about How to Train Your Dragon, though. How come these movies don't actually teach me how to train my dragon? I actually want to learn that, but instead these movies think I'll be content with magnificent stories and gorgeous animation. Yeah, that's nice, but I want to spend my time learning valuable skills. Where can I go to do that? Oh yeah, Skillshare. Cool. Skillshare is an online learning community that offers membership with meaning. With so much to explore, real projects to create, and the support of fellow creatives, Skillshare empowers you to accomplish real growth. Skillshare offers classes designed for real life, so you can move your creative journey forward without putting life on hold. You can learn and grow with short classes that fit your busy routine. Seriously, most of these classes are under 60 minutes in total length, and the lessons are only a couple minutes each, so you can learn in bite-sized chunks at your own pace. Skillshare offers thousands of inspiring classes for creative and curious people on topics including illustration, design, photography, video, freelancing, and more. Whether you're a beginner or an old pro, there's so much value for Skillshare to offer you. Right now, I'm watching Sorella Moore's class, YouTube Success, Build an Authentic Channel That's Worth the Follow. She provides amazing advice for people who want to start out on YouTube but don't know how. Plus, for veterans like me, it's great to hear about ways to further develop your authenticity through your channel. Skillshare is also incredibly affordable, especially when compared to pricey in-person classes and workshops. An annual subscription is less than $10 a month. Plus, the first 500 of my subscribers who click the link in the description will get a 2-month free trial of premium membership so you can explore your creativity. 2 months completely free. Click that link before all the slots are gone, y'all. Enjoy some amazing free knowledge with Skillshare.